Hello, podcast fans. I'm Rex Wilson. I'm the producer of the No Password podcast, and this is.
I'm Serena Gandy. I'm the producer of the Do We Belong Here podcast.
So, we decided for our holiday gifts that we're not going to spend any money and we're going to go super cheap. And we are going to give each other an episode as our holiday gifts. So, this year, Serena, I am giving you the Maretta Morovitz episode.
Oh.
And she is with MITRE, and she describes herself as the Kevin McCallister of cybersecurity, which, for those of you who don't know, that's the kid from Home Alone. And so she booby traps computers in the same way that Kevin booby trapped his house. So that is my gift to you, Serena.
Thank you very much, Rex. That sounds like the perfect holiday gift. It's the best gift I could ask for. I'm very happy to give you in return the Mary Galloway episode of Do We Belong Here. Mary, I think you know her, but for those who don't, is incredible. She's a force in this field for sure. She's also the CEO of the Women's Society of Cyberjitsu, and she is every day trying to make change and bring light to the voices that deserve to be shared. So I hope you enjoy it, and I know you will.
You know I will.
I know you will.
And I know my audience will.
Thank you all so much for listening to the Cyber Florida podcast this year. We've had an incredible 2024, sharing so many amazing people in the cybersecurity industry with you all. Cannot wait to continue it next year.
We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.
Kayley, did you know that Kenya saw more than 970 million cyber threat events in the first quarter of 2024?
Wow, I did not. However, I did know that Kenya's President William Ruto plans to accelerate his nation's technological progress by forging partnerships with the U.S. and 3 major tech companies.
Well, I tell you, so this is pretty cool because a lot of the news in the cyber world that comes out of even developed countries in Africa, right? It's how bad things are or jokes, right? That in a weird way, almost seem insensitive about Nigerian princes. And so It's good to see, I think the Carnegie Endowment had this article that we were kicking around with each other. And it's good to see, regular news, not even good news, but just regular news that treats the partnerships between the U.S. on the one hand and African countries on the other, like real news, as opposed to something where it seems like the United States is complaining about something that happened in Africa. And so this reporting had sort of 2 prongs to it. One was the United States government's relationship with the government of Kenya. And then the other was Cisco and some other U.S. businesses having relationships with the University of Nairobi. And this all seems like pretty good. But I mean, it all on the whole, more partnership and engagement seems to me like good news, Kayley. How do you read it?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you that it's very nice to have some positive news about that relationship with a nation in Africa. I think it's mutually beneficial for both sides of the coin, both Kenya and in a larger sense, Africa, as that influence kind of ripples out, and it's mutually beneficial for us as well because it aligns with our own interests in promoting global stability and economic partnerships and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I think the main headline was in the conversations that President Biden and his team had with President Ruto and his team that came out of it with Kenya committing to the framework for responsible state behavior in cyberspace. And I think that's sort of the big news. And then the university system in Nairobi kind of came behind that and put together some more lasting partnerships with Cisco. And I think there were partnerships also with Google that were announced on incident response. But to me, the 970 million cyber threats in one quarter, I wouldn't want to be the intern who had to calculate all those particular cyber threats. I'm hoping that was automated.
Yeah, I would hope so too. And if it hasn't been, then hopefully it will be in the future after these partnerships. Go ahead.
But that was one of the big. So the story for the last year among sort of responsible conversation about Africa's development has been about the mobile economy, and that instead of building out broadband in a lot of countries, it has leapt right to a mobile infrastructure. And the security for mobile apps is very different from, the usual security that we think about through secured corporate networks, for example. And a lot of that conversation that was happening between the U.S. companies on the one side and the Kenyan government and its universities on the other had to do with this, largely because Kenya is one of the leading African digital economies. And so those problems of mobile security are being addressed first, right? They're not sort of, it's not forcing, the U.S. isn't forcing network security where it's not really needed if we're going to go right to mobile and mobile app security.
Yeah. I think this is also a great example of what the role is between public and private and how they can partner together to overall just enhance capabilities and sort of create this robust digital economy and infrastructure that Kenya is hoping for.
Yeah, and I think they had Microsoft did create a partnership too, where they're agreeing to train some Kenyan nationals in cybersecurity skills. They're offering some free online certifications, and they're also going to support some AI training and research. And I think, there's for those companies, there's a lot of interest in one, network stability, but two, also in creating new partners, both in residential uses and in commercial uses. And so it seems like an example, at least to try, of communication between the corporate sector in the U.S. and the apparatus in Kenya that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think I would like to see a next step of taking that education to the public of like the people of Kenya and further out into Africa, because, it's good to start with the technical minded first so that we can get these frameworks and infrastructures in place. But ultimately, the way you're going to get 970 million down is if you educate the public, the average user.
I tell you, the other place, at least we've seen some through our clients in Africa, I've seen some engagement on the mobile side and mobile app side, and we've sort of had conversations with them around some of the issues here. But one of the other markets where I do some work, which is kind of similar to this, is colleges and universities. Like it's becoming increasingly hard with every year to get engagement through laptops because students are so used to using their phones for everything.
Interesting.
And so sometimes they're taking, a website that was designed to be accessed on a laptop in a secure way for student engagement, either in the classroom or some financial component of the relationship between a student and the university. And it's translating poorly from a security perspective to apps. Right. And it's kind of silly, but it's like, okay, we have essentially a mobile phone-based economy in some colleges and universities now. Like you don't have people who, if they have the choice between doing it on their phone versus doing it, in a different way, they're going to do it on their phone. And you got to make sure, if you're in charge of that whatever security you have is translating to the way they're actually doing it, not the way that they might have done it in the late 90s.
Yeah. So. And that's historically been kind of a weak spot for cybersecurity too. So they've got a lot of work to do.
All right. Well, I'm your host here, folks, Jack Clabby. I'm a cybersecurity attorney at Carleton Fields. With me, as always, is Kayley Melton. Kayley's the vice president for U.S. remote publishing teams at KnowBe4. Today, we will chat with Maretta Morovitz. Maretta is the principal cybersecurity engineer and Engage lead at MITRE. As the Engage lead, Maretta focuses on cyber denial, deception, and adversary engagement. When she's not outsmarting cyber criminals, Maretta can be found at her dance studio or eagerly awaiting her Hogwarts letter. This is going to be a lot of fun and a fantastic conversation. Stay tuned. We'll dive right in after a short break.
Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
All right, and welcome back. Our guest today is Maretta Morovitz. Maretta, welcome to No Password Required.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
All right, so Maretta, Kayley and I want to talk to you about sort of how you got into the business and in the early years, but let's start with where you are now. Can you tell us a little bit about your current role at MITRE?
Yeah, so I get to wear a bunch of different hats at MITRE, which I really enjoy. So In one hat, I am the lead for what's called MITRE Engage, which is our external set of resources helping organizations to think differently about cyber and to how to incorporate cyber denial, deception, and adversary engagement. I wear a sort of similar hat where I get to also help with our projects and research work, helping guide teams who are implementing these technologies and helping our sponsors be able to kind of more effectively use the technology. And then I also get to wear a people management hat. So I am both what we call a group lead, which is sort of like a first line manager helping staff, as well as what's called a capability area lead. So helping MITRE sort of direct people and resources around cyber deception and adversary engagement.
Oh, wow. That's great. So yeah, it's not only a subject matter expert, it's a subject matter expert and all these other things that you have that you keep on your plate.
Yeah, I really like the diversity of having different things to occupy my time and be able to kind of approach the problem from all angles. I think in so many ways, cyber is both a technology problem and a people problem. You know, how do we have the right staff? How do we have trained staff? And so getting to kind of tackle the problem from both implementing the technology and helping grow the body of people who can help be those implementers in the future is really exciting to me.
Maretta, can you share with us a little bit about your career path, about how you got to where you are?
Yeah, so I actually started as an intern at MITRE. So my very first internship in college was with MITRE. I was in a software engineering role, so completely different from the type of work that I get to work on now. Learned a couple things that summer. First and foremost being I am terrible at UX design and should never be allowed to do UX design. So that was a really great learning lesson. But one of the things that I also learned that summer is MITRE has a bunch of different sort of technical talks for folks to be able to attend. And I attended one on cyber, and it was the first time that I really heard this term cyber. And like, we had some courses back at school, but I hadn't taken any of them. And so thought that this concept sounded really interesting, that there was a lot more to explore. Went back to school, took every cyber related course that I could, returned to MITRE the following summer, but this time in sort of a cyber software focused internship. Got to kind of see another side of it, learned that, maybe the software side isn't quite where I want to be, but the cyber side is. So when I returned full-time to MITRE after that, it was much more in kind of more technical reverse engineering, hardware, that sort of side of the world, malware analysis. And then from there was able to kind of have opportunities to get to do more operational work and more research work as well. Married those two things up and sort of found my way into cyber deception. Was really lucky to have some great mentors along the way that helped point out opportunities and give me chances to be able to try learning these new technologies. And so really found deception, found it a really fascinating area and ran with it.
Maretta, what is cyber deception? Sounds extremely cool, but can you just let us know what is that? What is cyber deception?
Yeah. My favorite way of describing deception is, have you seen Home Alone?
Yes.
Of course.
Okay. You know how they booby trap the house? I get to do that to people's computers. And so it's thinking differently about how we can be able to detect adversary activities within an environment, how we can drive up their costs to operate while driving down the value of those operations, and then how we can learn more about real adversary behavior so that across the board, our defenses can be more threat informed.
So I say like that for the industry space that you're in, it's pretty cool that you've stayed with the same company since your original internship. And that's rarer and rarer these days. I mean, what is it about MITRE that has kept you there? And then, have there been challenges or obstacles that you've had to overcome on that path?
Yeah. So I think that MITRE is a little bit of an oddity in the space in that I'm not that different in terms of how long I've been there. And in fact, compared to a lot of employees, I'm really junior. We have people 20, 30, 40 years at the organization. And so I think one of the things that really attracted me to MITRE is that you do have these people that are the top in their field and have been doing different things completely different from the things that I'm working on, but are a resource that I can go to, whether it's because we're looking for subject matter expertise on a project, whether I'm just interested in learning more and they're, having a technical talk, that you have sort of these deep areas of technical expertise throughout the company, so that I always tell when my interns come for the summer, I'd say, you have to try really hard to be bored here this summer because there's so much going on. Even if you hate your project, we can find something that you will find interesting, and you're going to have to work hard to not be interested in something. And so I think that piece has been really attractive to me. The other part about MITRE that I really enjoy is our role as sort of a trusted advisor. So MITRE if you're not familiar with how we sort of operate, we operate these things called federally funded research and development centers, or FFRDCs, which is just a complicated way of saying we sort of have one foot in academia and one foot in the contractor space. And we sort of straddle both sides to help the government with systems engineering and proof of concept and prototyping, the types of things to help them understand, they have a problem. What is the best way to approach that problem? And then the actual sort of production and long-term O&M will go to the for-profit contractors. But in our FFRDC role, we get to kind of be in that exploratory, more researchy phase to help them understand what the problems are and the potential solutions are. So really enjoy that kind of more prototyping and research side of the work as well.
Have there been, for you, have you faced adversities or things you've had to overcome on that journey, or have you felt it to be you've been progressing fairly regularly?
So I think one of the things I've been really lucky early on in my career at MITRE was to have some terrific mentors. And so actually my senior year, I was doing my senior design project at MITRE because a couple of folks who had been sort of management and whether it's people management, technical management, wanted to kind of help me with my projects. And then once I transitioned to full-time at MITRE, those same folks kind of really helped me identify opportunities and find new ways to kind of engage with the large body of work that is MITRE. I think MITRE is a place where having a network is really, really important because so much of our work is sort of driven by what are the different technologies and subject matter, areas that our sponsors care about. And I will preface, I keep saying the word sponsor. So at MITRE, we refer to our government customers as our sponsors. So that is where that term is coming from. I'll try to use customers, but it always feels weird to say. So I think I was really lucky. And so I've had a lot of different opportunities pretty early on in my career that really helped me be able to excel and to drive into new areas and be able to take more leadership roles because I had management that really gave me a lot of leash early on. I had one manager in particular, Stan Barr. Dr. Barr is kind of one of the heads of MITRE's research program. Right now, he runs our critical infrastructure research, as well as been involved in our deception research for a really long time. And he used to, give me opportunities to present or give ideas that in all reality, it was probably pretty early in my career for me to kind of be given those opportunities, but really let me kind of jump into the deep end, and then was also always there if I was floundering and drowning to pull me out, but give me the amount of space that I needed to make the mistakes, learn from them, figure out how to not make them again, but then also not have it be career detrimental either. So really appreciate that support that I got, and I think MITRE has a lot of people like that who really value intellectual curiosity and really want staff to be able to have the space to explore that, but also recognize that, junior staff are going to mess up and we're going to need help and they'll be there to pull you out on the other end.
I feel like that's a key part of mentorship that maybe isn't discussed as much. You need to have someone that can see the potential, like the place that you can get to and you might not even realize it yet, and kind of throw you into the deep end, like you said, to give you those big challenges that push you forward.
For sure. I think it's so important. And I think it really helps staff realize what they can do because oftentimes it's not that they're not taking advantage of an opportunity. It's that they might not feel that they can or should. And having someone to kind of give them that push to say, you know what, try for that job or go give that briefing can be what they need to really be able to find a huge opportunity that leads to other things.
That's also the story you tell too about you have the 2 summer internships and then you stay engaged your senior year and they're willing to work with you. That's important because this episode will come out in the summer and there'll be a lot of folks who are doing internships or in the cyber community who are working with interns. We always say it to our interns, don't forget when you go back to campus, we have an interest in you still. We want to help you. Please call us, right? It doesn't end on August 1st. That relationship can continue. And that's a great story, Maretta, that you benefited from that.
Oh, I say the exact same thing to my interns. And I always tell them, if over winter break, you're looking to pick up, 10 hours a week of work, give me a call. I always have things that need to be done. So I think it's hugely important. And it's a great sort of ability to get ahead of the job market too, right? If you're looking for internships senior year and you're actively still at companies, you never know who you're going to meet or, what other events you're going to get invited to. So I think it's just a great opportunity all around.
So kind of rolling back the clock a bit and speaking of some obstacles and how you've overcome them, I know as part of the Neurospicy Brigade myself, I understand that as a kid you dealt with ADHD, and I'm curious if you could talk a bit about how that impacted you.
Yeah. So if it wasn't obvious from the fact that I'm involved in a million different things and constantly bouncing between a million different things, I have ADHD. But I will say I was actually only recently diagnosed. So it wasn't until I was almost 30 that I got that diagnosis. How the heck? I never realized it about myself before then. It kind of makes me laugh now looking back. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, how did I not realize that? But I think a big part of it is just how much, we have this image in our society, in our minds of, what ADHD or any of the neurospicinesses look like. And a lot of times folks don't quite fit into that mold. So I wasn't the kid bouncing up and down in the back of the classroom. I was the kid zoning out because I was thinking about 10 other things based on like one comment the teacher made at the beginning, which was no longer relevant, but I've now missed like the rest of class. But I managed to get really good grades because I was also really anxious about getting good grades. So I would go home every night and like read the textbook myself from start to finish because I could hyper focus and reread the book, right? So it wasn't kind of manifesting in the regular ways that we think as a society that these different things come out. And I think it's really important that as we're learning more and kind of as a society able to talk more about these things, that we have a chance to sort of share our experiences and be able to help someone else not wait until they're 30 to realize and be able to put systems in place that help them out before that. So I think for me, there was a lot of things that my ADHD made more complicated in my life, and a lot of things that it's helped me do. And I think one of the nice things now is that I'm starting to learn, how to make it work for me where I can, and then how to put structures in place when I can't. But definitely there was a lot of time spent teaching myself material because I didn't spend quite enough time in class actually paying attention to what was said. And a lot of time spent dabbling in 50 million things versus the topic I was actually supposed to be learning. But I think what's nice now is in my role, because I'm not meant to be sort of seeing a project from start to finish. Oftentimes my role is to come in, help get a team started, give them sort of that subject matter expertise, come in and help for the parts that are kind of that creative process. And then 100% step back and say, someone else needs to keep the train on the tracks. Because if I'm driving, we're driving off a cliff.
But that's great to be able to recognize that, right? You're the activator, which is an extraordinary skill. And there's a lot of project managers that don't have the activator skill. So let's make a team where activators get to work with project managers and we'll figure it out, right? It works.
Yes. And I am a strong believer that every role needs to have like co or deputy or whatever the organization wants to call it, because you're never going to find all the skill sets for one role in a single person. And so I am constantly looking for kind of my complements in the skills that I'm not so good at, right? The project management where it's finance or task, checking in on tasks and delivery dates and the rest of it. So I have some people that are fantastic at that, and they love to do the detailed oriented, like, did we do everything on this checklist for this task, versus my brain is like, I paid attention to checklist item 1 and now I'm off on the next thing. I think that's really important. And it also is a great opportunity, again, going back to that mentorship piece. I oftentimes like to find folks who are coming up the ranks who have those skill sets that I don't have, because it gives them a chance to really, own something and sink their teeth into something, because I can't help them with that, but I can still be there to kind of help guide and advocate where needed.
That's a great point. So can you tell us a little bit more about Engage? Because I mean, there's a lot of collaboration going on there. Tell us a bit more what it is and kind of what it does.
Yeah, so MITRE Engage is our external set of resources around cyber denial, deception, and adversary engagement. So I talked a little bit about, the Home Alone analogy and all that. The way I like to think of denial and deception are sort of two pillars that when we bring them together with strategic planning and analysis really allow us to have those bigger threat-informed impacts where we're setting goals and trying to make progress towards them. And oftentimes, we think about deception. A lot of the vendors who have awesome products out there are kind of selling these really technologically advanced or really complicated things. And that's great for the more mature organizations. And that might be something that, the larger guys are able to really run with. But oftentimes these technologies don't need to be that complicated, right? If you think about, detecting adversary behavior, maybe that's as simple as I have a folder on my CEO's desktop that says my tax documents here, and the CEO knows she should never, click on that folder, and there's no reason for anyone else to be on that desktop. But if that folder gets accessed, now you have a high fidelity alert that someone's poking around. And you can kind of draw that out to maybe it's a network share that looks like it's some really interesting research project or really interesting, HR data or whatever it might be that actually has no kind of real purpose on the network. And so how can you think about making these tripwires? And we talk a lot about also thinking about what are real adversary behaviors. So I think a really great one is, a lot of organizations, individuals will all have admin access, regardless of whether they actually need admin access on that station, right? And so if you think about, okay, of these users, how many of them are ever going to be running PowerShell commands or, running different very commonly used lateral movement or discovery commands, and then putting tokens on those laptops so that, if someone does try to run Who Am I, you have a high fidelity alert. None of these things are complicated. It's just a new way of thinking about the technology and thinking about how we can home aloneify our networks, and also bringing in a lot of the things that we do all the time in home security, right? If we are going on vacation, leaving your lights on a timer, putting the radio on when you leave the house, putting a sign out front that says this home protected by ADT, no one considers any of that breakthrough, but we don't bring that to the cyber world. And so a lot of times it's just, how do you bring that over? Even though I always tell people I'm an ops guy, right? Like I'm not doing cutting edge research or writing IEEE papers or the rest of it, right? I'm thinking about how do I put an ADT sign in front of my computer.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a really approachable way to have an impact on cyber.
I love these down-to-earth analogies. I think it makes it a lot easier to understand for people who might not be technical.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly love the Home Alone analogy. And I have to say, of all of Kevin McCallister's innovations, I personally like the scalding hot door handle. Do you have a favorite innovation in your Engage toolkit like that? Like a favorite tripwire?
Yeah, I think one that I think is really interesting is using fake credentials. So a lot of times we were just talking with an organization that didn't have two-factor. And the reason had nothing to do with technology. It had everything to do with a policy problem. For their users, there was a bunch of kind of steps that needed to go through before they could implement two-factor and have the users actually need a second form of authentication. And so they came to us, and it was after they'd actually implemented it, and they sort of said, what could we have done? It was 2 years that we didn't have two-factor in place. What could we have done during those 2 years? And so we sort of sat down and said, well, if you had scattered decoy credentials throughout the network and monitored for those decoy credentials being used, you would have had a high fidelity alert that something had gone wrong and something bad was happening. And it wouldn't have fixed your two-factor problem. You still need to be making progress to implement, two-factor, but it at least would have been that canary in the coal mine in that time between when you identified the problem and you were able to fix it. And I think decoy credentials are a great one because stolen credentials is such a commonly used adversary tactic. And so it's simple. It also has a lot of opportunity to sort of get ramped up as in maturity. So baseline is I scatter some decoy credentials around and I monitor for them to be used. Great, success. Step number 2 is, okay, and I swap them out every X many days. So now not only do I know that an adversary got in, I know when they stole the credential or what the time frame was, and I know where they stole it from. And you can kind of think about moving these things up. Like I put some of them in my email, right? I have 2 admins sharing a password. Well, now not only do I know that, the credential got stolen, I know that someone's accessing emails, right? And so you can start to kind of build and kind of ramp things up so that you can have a nice bite-sized chunk, but then figure out how to roll it into something bigger down the road.
That's really clever. I love it.
It's fun. It's creative too. And I think that's what's fun about it, because it also, the whole point of adversary engagement is to not have everyone thinking the same way. And so if everyone implements decoy credentials in the same way and puts them in the same places and uses the same credentials, it's not as useful. When you get people thinking creatively and figuring out, what works for us and what's more realistic in our organization, you start getting a lot of really creative things that allows that bigger impact.
I feel like that creative thinking is what's been sadly missing in a lot of these cybersecurity conversations over the years. That, like, I don't know, everybody wants to implement something that's real fancy and technologically advanced, but sometimes the real solution is something very low tech or just kind of outside the box, low budget.
And I think that's what you just said was huge, that the low budget piece, because most of the organizations don't have a budget, right? Most of the organizations that I work with are lucky that they have a cyber person on staff. Most of the time they have MSSPs, but it might not even be, it's a small portion of their budget. And so how do you create solutions that are sustainable and maintainable for these organizations? It's not the big fancy tech. They can't afford it. They can't implement it. They can't monitor it. I can't tell you how many organizations I've talked to that say, yeah, we have logging, but we don't have the staff to look at them. So they just sit there. And if we have an incident, like they'll look at the logs, but it's not until there's an incident. And so that's not helpful to be proactive. And so being proactive has to be simple. That's
a huge problem too, for where we see it as legal counsel to those companies, is you knew enough to have logging and turn it on, but then alerts would happen and it was as if you're just like publishing a newspaper no one read. Which is almost worse than not having logging at all from a liability perspective. So that sort of thing. It's like, all right, if you have $100 in your budget, and you're going to do something for $90, don't think you're going to have $10 left to monitor that thing, right? Maybe let's do something a little less ambitious, but put a little more money for monitoring. And so that when fires go off, we have fire extinguishers.
Yep. The other thing I want to comment on that you said is the creativity piece. In so many parts of cyber, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul when it comes to staffing, right? So we always talk about the talent shortage, but all we're doing is taking technical people from one area that is also short people and throwing them into another. I think with the creative parts of deception, there's opportunities for human behavioral scientists. There's opportunities for graphic designers and visual designers. There's opportunities for, this huge range of folks who aren't normally part of cyber. To be part of the process and part of, creating these solutions. So I think that's another really cool, exciting thing to me, is just, it actually opens up new opportunities to expand the community and expand practitioners.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like we definitely need more of that interdisciplinary approach for sure. We've been too siloed for too long. We took the metaphor of like the hacker in a hoodie in a basement and like made that our entire ethos.
Yep, for sure.
So I'm curious, can you give me your favorite example of a project where a collaboration with an outside company turned out very positive?
Yeah. So actually a couple of years ago, I had the chance to present on this at ShmooCon, which is one of my favorite hacker conferences. And I'm so sad that it's ending this year. Well, we can be sad about that one. Was actually with HSBC. So it sort of seems funny that a Chinese bank based in London and MITRE are working together. But we actually had a really successful relationship where their cyber threat intelligence organization has worked with our team to do different deception related operations and be able to share it publicly, which was really great. So we actually ran a sample where we had a malware sample. We were setting up what we call isolated engagement environments. So these are, they almost describe it as a sandbox on steroids. So it's isolated from the network, has all the controls in place to be able to monitor and watch what's going on. But the intention is that it's not just detonating and watching what's happening. It's actually trying to elicit additional engagement. So there's stuff in the environment for the adversary to go after. There's, things that make it look lived in. And it really gives us a chance to understand not just how that sample of malware works, but, what happens next. And so we've done some really cool research with them, and we were able to present on it at ShmooCon, where not only did we sort of see this process, we actually were able to kind of understand more about what was happening. And in one of these operations, they had run a piece of malware. Their EDR solution didn't detect the specific technique the adversary was using. They passed the malware to us. We ran it in our environment. We had a different EDR solution. We also didn't detect it. Went back, were able to actually go back and understand what was going on, and then contribute to attack a new sub technique based on what we were seeing. And so the sort of history of attack, and if you ever heard Adam Pennington, the attack lead, talk about this, it's really fascinating, but it was born out of MITRE's deception program back in the day. And so it was at a time where MITRE wasn't talking about the fact that we were doing these sorts of isolated engagement environment operations, but we were learning all this valuable information that we wanted to share with the community. And so attack became our way of doing it. Obviously, today, attack is much bigger than it was when it first came out. And, deception is no longer the lion's share of how we're getting information. There's so many contributors from around the world, but we still are able to add new things to it, like that new sub-technique that I was discussing before.
Maretta, you're like at the forefront of a lot of the new technology. You talk about stuff that is now commonplace, but you're also at the forefront of some things. How do you are there things that you're working on now that are sort of theoretical that haven't had applications that you think are like really cool that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I'm actually involved with one research project right now. So we're looking at alternative ways of deploying deception. And so looking at SDN, software-defined networking, as a means of deploying network-based artifacts. So there's been some work going on in that for a bit now, but excited to sort of be part of the team that's looking at new applications and new ways of doing that, as well as sort of how that marries up with traditional like host-based deception as well, and bringing that all together.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
So just to go back again to being, it sounds like your passion for computer science maybe wasn't immediate. Maybe you resisted a little bit. Can you tell us about that? Like, what was that like, and why did you initially resist it, and what overcame it?
Yeah, so this is the perfect topic. So at the time of the recording, we're coming out of Father's Day weekend. So my dad was a computer science major in grad school, worked in computers his whole life. And so clearly nothing your dad does can be cool. And so I wanted nothing to do with computer science up until I started college because, that was dad's nerdy thing. And so I actually went into school thinking I was going to be a mechanical engineer. My suite mate at the end of my hall took a computer science class. So at Tufts, which is where I went to school, all of the first year engineers take sort of survey classes, and you don't actually declare your major until the end of your first semester. So I was sort of in general engineering classes, and he, wouldn't stop talking about how great his computer science class was. And a couple of times I'd like kind of sit in while he was doing homework or whatever. And I was like, all right, that is kind of cool. And so took a class my next semester, and just really fell in love with the discipline, and had to make the phone home to dad to say like, hey dad, you were right. I really like this. I'm sorry for giving you crap all those years. But this actually is interesting. So that's kind of how I wandered into computer science. And then the cyber stuff, as I was talking about before, really did come from MITRE.
Maretta, did he play it cool on the phone, or did he take a victory lap?
He played it cool, but
right.
you could hear the victory lap happening. He tried to play it cool though. I think the real victory lap was the next time that him and his work buddies were all talking about, the latest bug or something, and I could actually join in the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
He was pretty happy about it.
That's awesome.
But I will say he's a mainframe programmer, which is still it hurts his soul that I didn't learn Fortran and COBOL in school.
Oh my God.
I think he was going to ask for his money back on the tuition when he was finding out that that wasn't a staple of every computer science degree. So he's still a little bitter about that.
That's awesome.
I feel like the only people who think that everyone needs to learn those languages are mainframe programmers.
No, he's not wrong. There is such a huge demand, and I'd probably be making a lot more money if I hadn't. But that's okay. I'll leave that to him.
Sometimes we do ask people to come on the show, what was the one thing you'd recommend that a young person learn? And then they say Fortran. And they explain it for that purpose, which is it. I mean, it's like wrong. The opposite of what you think, right? But it makes sense.
Oh, they can't hire people fast enough. There is no one. So, and those systems aren't going away anytime soon.
It's like learning Latin. You're always translating original text.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. So we're going to take a short break now, and when we return, we're going to put you through the lifestyle polygraph. So please stay with us, everybody.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
Welcome back. As many of you know, the Lifestyle Polygraph is a test used by the federal government to determine if a person is worthy of learning some of our nation's most important secrets. Here, we use this technique for slightly lower stakes to determine whether our guest can join our fantasy cybersecurity squad. Maretta, are you ready for the lifestyle polygraph?
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, question 1. As a part owner of a dance studio in the Boston area, can you share a little about your passion for dance and what inspired you to open your own studio?
Yeah, so I am a part owner in a ballroom studio called Ignis Arts in the Boston area, and we're actually brand new, so very excited to be in the new role. So I actually, as a kid, did martial arts my whole life, and similar to the computer science, my dad did martial arts, and so I wanted nothing to do with martial arts until about 11, and then finally went to martial arts class and was like, wow, this is great. So I don't learn from my mistakes, clearly. But one of the things that I really loved about ballroom dance in particular and partner dance is, just how much of the physics and the kind of body mechanics from the martial arts translated over into something completely different. And so if you had asked 15-year-old me if I would wear a long dress and heels and dance around a room, I would have laughed you out of the room. And still some days I'm like, am I doing this? Okay. But I absolutely love sort of the physics of it and the ability to kind of work with another person and to be able to move and then to be able to do it all to music. To me has just been a really, really kind of exciting and interesting way of applying a set of, athletic skills that I had. And what I really love about partner dance in particular is there's a huge community of people who just go out and do this for fun, right? There's a bunch of us that compete and there's a bunch of us that just go out on a Friday night and go dancing, sometimes in places that are scheduled for dancing and sometimes because there's just music playing. And so that community aspect has been just really something that I fell in love with as almost as much as the dance itself. And so when we started our studio, it really was because we loved dance and we also felt like we could build up a community of people kind of that are looking to support artists and support local dancers. And so part of the philosophy of our school is to make sure that all of the artists that are part of the school as teachers, as event organizers, receive kind of a higher than living wage. A lot of times these folks aren't really paid that much for the work that they're doing. And so we wanted to kind of create a community that really brought that to the focus. And so been really fun to be able to do that.
I absolutely love that. That's awesome.
I have a partner who I work with who's an Aikido specialist and has done it for years and years and years. And his partner is a dance instructor. Mm-hmm. And he has talked about exactly what you're talking about, Maretta, which is why they have so much in common, although it doesn't seem like it on the surface, is that, and the conversations I think that they have are just beautiful because it's a lot about what am I going to do and what's the other person going to react. And it's a neat thing that you're marrying it so directly like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think the other piece too, and fighting has this, and then dance has this. It's a weird form of social interaction that doesn't actually, it has rules and doesn't require like direct talking all the time. And so the breadth of different people that are part of it, you have everyone from sort of, I did ballet and when I was younger through, I'm an engineer who just is looking for something social and like the structure of dance. I think that's really cool too. And it's been a fun part of it as well.
And that's a little bit, and this kind of overlap with what you do on the regular basis for your living, right? With the tacit cooperation, right? We're going to try to find a way to communicate good and bad, but without explicitly saying what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yep, for sure.
All right. Question 2 is sort of related. If you were invited to be a dancer on Dancing with the Stars, who would your dream celebrity partner be and why?
Okay, so first I'll preface this with, while I own a studio, I am not by any stretch of the imagination a pro dancer. So the poor celebrity that has partnered with me is in for a rough ride because I'm not that much above amateur. So I'll preface with that. But I think if I had to pick a celebrity, I would go with Dan Radcliffe because, who doesn't want to dance with Harry Potter? Right. Also, the theme song to Harry Potter is a Viennese waltz, and dream is to dance that one day as like a performance piece. But if I can sub out the pros that I normally dance with and throw Dan Radcliffe in there, like I'm all over it. Let's do it.
That would be amazing.
It's a waltz. Oh, yeah, that makes sense, right? I never put that together.
It's a Viennese waltz, so it's faster than a slow waltz, but it's a little challenging, but it's fun.
And he's got theater training too. So I bet he's got some dance,
Yeah.
something in the back. I bet he would be awesome on that.
I feel like he would be. And I mean, there's a little bit of a height difference, but we can get over that. It'll be fine.
So 3 is also indirectly related. Since you're here with us today, it's safe to assume that your Hogwarts letter is still on its way, as are ours.
I check every day.
I know. I keep waiting. I'm holding out hope, though. So once you finally get into Hogwarts, which house do you think the Sorting Hat will put you in, and what kind of mischief do you see yourself getting into?
Okay. So I have definitely never thought long and hard about this all the time. It sort of depends on the day and when I answered the Pottermore quiz. But it was usually Gryffindor or Ravenclaw. So I go slight. What am I feeling more today? I don't know. I feel like I'm way too impulsive to be a Ravenclaw, like through and through, and getting into like way too much trouble that I shouldn't get into. So it probably gives a slight edge to Gryffindor, but like hopefully with slightly more common sense than most of them, but like marginally. And what trouble would I get into? I mean, I feel like it has to be something cyber related. Like we never hear about what the network was like.
Yes. Right.
Absolutely.
I feel like they think that with their magic, they're not worried about like APT threats, but I feel like, I mean, there's a lot of data there. They've got, the Sorcerer's Stone alone.
Right. The flu powder network is just wide open.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like I would do something to mess with the networks if I'm going to be getting in trouble. That's probably it. Which I guess you shouldn't admit in a poly that I'm hacking networks, but it's fine. It's not a real poly.
Kayley, have you done it recently? The Pottermore quiz?
Not recently.
Yeah.
Generally, when I take it, it puts me in Gryffindor first.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same way because I always am like, if there's a question where I can get glory, I always say I want glory. But then if it goes too far to want ambitious, I'm like, no, that's going to be a Slytherin question. But I feel like the kind of person who answers it not to get Slytherin probably is Slytherin.
That's the thing. My second is always Slytherin. So
Slytherin
the way I make peace with that is just, Harry Potter was the same. It's fine. He was supposed to be in Slytherin. He got put in Gryffindor. So you know what? I'm fine. I'm in good company.
Right? It's the ambition, right? That's what they say.
Exactly. It's the ambition.
My kids did it yesterday again because they always have this fight about who's what, and the kids are always there was Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw, and I have 3 kids. None of them ever get Gryffindor or Slytherin, but my wife is hardcore Slytherin. She's like, look, I'm going to get trained in magic. I don't have to tell you, right? Like, we're already not playing by the rules. Slytherin it is, and so I've got to deal with that on a daily basis.
Yeah. I have to say, I've always wished I was in Ravenclaw. I own a few little things from Ravenclaw, but it's just Pottermore has never rewarded me with that. So I just have to be happy with where I'm at.
It knows all.
It knows.
It's true.
It doesn't take your preferences into account.
No, it doesn't. Like, listen, I know who's behind that. Nice try. All right. Number 4. You have a unique way of reciting the alphabet. Could you share how you developed this special talent?
Yes. So my go-to special talent question whenever I'm asked, what's your special talent, is that I can say the alphabet faster backwards than I can say it forwards.
Wow.
And so it's not as impressive as it sounds, because when you say it forwards, you default to like the song, right? So parts of it slow down, but when you go backwards, your brain doesn't do that to you. So you can go faster. But the reason I learned how to do this was because, as I said, I was in martial arts as a kid, and our sensei used to do like little challenges that were just meant to, make like test your discipline or your, just stay out of trouble. And so one of them was, if 5 of us, I think we had like a week or something, could learn how to say the alphabet backwards without looking at it, she would give us a pizza party. And so as a chronic overachiever, I not only wanted to learn how to say it, I wanted to be able to do it as fast as humanly possible. And for some reason, my brain has retained that knowledge. Not like useful knowledge. Like, it'd be great if my brain could remember, things that mattered, or, the fact that I, left the stove on. But it can't do that. But it can remember how to say the alphabet backwards.
Maretta, I want to imagine that there's going to be a time when you're going to be on Dancing with the Stars and someone's going to be like, who are we going to assign to Dan Radcliffe? And then someone's going to say, all right, he's got this weird thing. The fastest person to recite the alphabet backwards, that's who's going to be partnered up with.
I love it.
You're going to say, I got this.
I was born for this. Dan Radcliffe, here I come.
Oh my God. All right. Final question. With your growing dance empire and impressive achievements in cybersecurity, you're on the path to becoming a Boston area icon. Who are your top 3 all-time favorite Bostonians? And the producer has made a note here. Please do not include Tom Brady, as he is not a Bostonian, and he belongs to us in Tampa now.
Okay. I will fully admit I'm not, and I don't know if I can say this that loud in Boston, so I gotta make sure no one can hear me. I'm not a huge sports fan when it comes to Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics. So Tom Brady wasn't on the list, so he's okay. Which I can't say, like I said, I can't say that too loud around here or someone will egg my house. But if I had to pick top 3 Bostonians, so I'd say I have to start with John and Abigail Adams because, so fun little anecdotal facts here. Abigail Adams grew up in my hometown. And so growing up, we learned a lot about Abigail Adams because that was the only useful thing to talk about historically in Weymouth, kind of random town. And secondly, my grandparents' house, the apple trees in the back, were originally part of the John Adams estate. So grew up having apples from the original John Adams apple orchard.
That's
so
awesome.
feel some kinship to John and Abigail there. And then let's see, I think, all right, this is bad because I should have double checked that he's actually from Boston, but in my brain, Chris Evans is from Boston. I'm pretty sure that's true. And I'm going to assume it is. I'm just going to deception if it's not. But we're going to go with that because, Captain America. How do you not pick Captain America? That's
Fair
clearly the whole package. That's what he is.
I'm just hoping he finds his Abigail Adams out there somewhere.
Exactly.
Or John Adams, whatever he's looking for. There's a book that I love. I think I've talked about in the podcast before, but it's the collection. It's called My Dearest Friend, and it's a collection of the letters between John and Abigail Adams, and it's unbelievable. They were so cool, those two. They really spoke to each other with great reverence and respect. And I think they probably knew that their correspondence would get published one day, but hey, that's cool too, right? They were writing with posterity in mind. It's and it's the kind of thing you can dive into and read a couple pages, and it gives you a sense of, wow, all right, people are decent and they treat each other decently.
Yeah,
awesome.
I know exactly that book. It's a great one.
So cool.
Again, anything that had any Abigail Adams, we did in history class because, again, there's not much in Weymouth. So we got Abigail Adams.
I also love the idea that you can have the apples that John Adams had.
That's
right?
so cool.
That's such a neat callback to a historical moment where we don't get as much of that anymore, to eat or drink the things that they had at the time.
Yeah.
Put yourself
I
in
will
their
admit,
mindset.
the trees are probably nowhere near as good. They were kind of like crappy apples at this point in their little apple lives, but it was still cool.
All right. So Kayley, is Maretta able to join our cybersecurity team?
You know what? I feel like her adversary engagement skills are pretty valuable, not to mention all the other amazing skills, but I have to say her dance skills are also a pretty nice bonus.
Yeah, you won't be bored. If we get bored, we can start dancing. It'll be great.
Exactly.
So Maretta, thank you so much for joining us today. If our listeners want to connect with you, what are some ways that they can do that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest one. I'm pretty sure I'm one of the only Marettas and definitely the only Maretta Morovitz, so you can find me there. Also, the MITRE Engage LinkedIn, if you reach out through there. And then you can find me at engage@mitre.org is probably the easiest email, or mmorovitz@mitre.org. So my first initial last name at mitre.org. And all of those will go to me.
Thank you very much, Maretta. That was awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. This is great.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. But first, Kayley, what did you learn today?
today. I don't know if it was learned, but I was reminded of how those of us with neurospicy brains, like ADHD, we absolutely fit in very special places and are, I don't know, the things that are considered symptoms or disabilities are actually our strengths a lot of times. I really appreciated how she turned her natural intellectual curiosity and go-getter spirit into an amazing career.
I just want to, say a word in my capacity at the law firm where I work, Carlton Fields. I'm the hiring chair, and so I deal with our summer associates every year. And I just want to reemphasize to everybody listening how important it is after the internship period ends, both for the interns and for those who've had the interns all summer. Please stay in touch. There's really nobody else that the companies have, right? That's the next generation of folks. And similarly, like when you go back to college or wherever you're coming from, where you were an intern, stay in touch with the people that you worked with, right? One, it's a mercenary thing to do if you want a job, but two, that's where you stay in contact with your mentors and your sponsors. And keep the thread up, stay in touch, stay in contact. Don't let summer be the end of things. And I think Maretta's story today is like a very specific example of success that had, in some part due to that relationship continuing into her senior year. Well, for the entire No Password Required team, I'm Jack Clabby. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. And if you know someone who might like it, please share it with them. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. And a special thank you goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website, cyberflorida.org/pod. All opinions expressed by the No Password Required podcast participants are their own and do not exclusively represent the views and opinions of Cyber Florida.